Hi there, on Dion Astral Oracles here, and I'm going to channel the spirit of the mushrooms. And there are a lot of reasons for this. Partially, a subset of you have requested me to do so before, and are partially very interested in plant medicines yourself. Is my impression, but partially. Have resonated with some of the stuff I did with. I believe I've channeled LSD and tobacco before, but now I'm going to channel perhaps one of the plant spirits that I'm the most acquainted with, and I personally like to call him her Knoll, and that's that's just sort of a word that resonates, and it's also a pun on a Danish expression, but essentially is the spirit that hides in the mushrooms. And I think I've spoken about this before. A lot of my early spiritual experiences have been with the psilocybin mushroom, different types of them, partially the ones I've picked, and partially psilocybe cubensis, which I've grown, and it sort of became an aid through, well, all of my adult life, actually. So it was usually the entity or the plant I would check in with to try to call my own bullshit and to try to have these resets. And essentially, I think as a supplement to this type of practice, the channeling, I essentially think that these depersonalization or ego death or dissolution or union experiences, however you might want to approach it, are very important to have, because we all tend to get caught up in identity. And it seems like the force that we call ego, this well, type of controlling, separating force that keeps our personal narrative running and informed and sort of defines us as who we are, tends to solidify and habitualize itself. And so it's very helpful, at least it has been for me, to have access to these types of resets where everything is sort of processed and brought up, and then you merge into this space of total experience, wordless experience, and then you get put back together again and try to operate from there. And there are a lot of pitfalls to all of them, and I don't really think it's that important how you get there, whether it's through psychedelics or whether it's through breath work or whether it's through meditation or spontaneously. Some people are just very connected to this, or you love going in isolation tanks, and well, you can even use glossolalia, that's speaking in tongues, or intense prayer, or sleep deprivation, or flatulence. But the last one I wouldn't encourage. That's a message, a general message in what I'm bringing through is don't beat up on yourself, literally. So there are many ways to reach these states, but for some reason I feel that the mushroom and I always had a special type of symbiosis that I've never really had with other substances, and I've learned a lot from other substances, like including DMT and ayahuasca and LSD and all those things. And I'm still processing the last time I smoked salvia in 2009 and everything. So it's, I believe that they're like great teachings in all of these, but it does seem that we have personal resonances with some of these, and they sort of find us when they need to, and when they need to teach us a lesson. So it's been strange for me this year, because I've been traveling and I've been kind of apprehensive about seeking out a criminal element, especially in Mexico. So I haven't had access to psychedelics, and I haven't sought them out, and I've kind of felt like it was important for my process to learn to work without them. And I also have the privilege that I can take in so much energy that I move into these altered states by myself, either through meditation or my Kundalini yoga practice. So there are definitely other ways to do it, but at the same time, I do kind of miss the mushroom. And of course, I'm in Oaxaca, Mexico. And if any of you know the modern story of how psychoactive mushrooms, the different psilocybe species, came onto the world stage again, it was in 57, I believe, around that time, where Gordon Wasson, he stumbled upon into a village in northern Oaxaca where this woman named Maria Sabina, who's a celebrated figure on murals down here to this day, she introduced him to the mushrooms. And her story is interesting because she doesn't necessarily come from a lineage of Mexican shamans, but she discovered this mushroom, like it found her spontaneously while she was out by some waterfalls, I believe. You can also look up her story with her sister, and they were hungry, and then she ate these mushrooms, and I believe they had a sick mother or a sick aunt or something, and then the mushroom told her how to cure her. So and ever since then, like this practice grew for her. So she worked with the mushroom, and then it became well, this kind of sought out place for, you know, the different characters that we connect with that era. So I believe both George Harrison and John Lennon and even Walt Disney and Tim Leary and whatnot, they were all down here participating in her mushroom trips. Also Albert Hoffman, who was the first to synthesize LSD. So and from there on, it moved into the world stage. So and it was because Gordon wasn't the first one to kind of come upon her. He published an article in Time Life where he began speaking of it, and the 50s and 60s, of course, had a major interest in this until there was the backlash, and these things got prohibited because people were looking, you know, deep down the barrel and getting the culture into all sorts of awakenings and weird trouble. So it's been with us ever since, and sort of lived on in these subcultures. And now with the experiments carried out in Johns Hopkins and other places, it seems like it has also, like, the therapeutic potential has been recognized again, that it seems to alleviate people's fear of death, and it seems to be able to cure depression quite effectively. Though I would say that in my own life, it has also had the effect of, I think in 2007 and 2008, it kind of showed me all the things that were wrong, and I was unable to integrate it. And so it, of course, just made my innate depression, bubble up to the surface. And so it's the expression that sometimes used is that it's, well, it's not a chauffeur. It's more like a map. That's at least how I like to think of it. So it can kind of show you what's up and down and where you need to go, but it's you need to drive yourself there. And that's, of course, one of the pitfalls with working with plant medicines and psychedelics in general, that they're not a magic cure for anything, but they are these type of wise guides. And I believe that's an interesting segue to channeling it, because essentially you can channel anything. And there is, like, this deep intelligence within the mushroom that you can communicate with while you are in that state. And I think, like, quite a few years ago, I reached the point where I felt like I could actually speak to it without being under the influence of the mushroom. So we have kind of integrated our systems. So I feel like it's in many ways a part of me, and it's sort of the framework that weirdly enough keep me grounded. This realization that, okay, there are so many weird experiences you can have, and essentially you are just a human being right here in this moment, breathing, constantly dissolving and reassembling. but I think it would be very, very interesting for me to try to channel it. Like personally, I love exploring this art form of the channeling, and I also think like it would probably be interesting for people to see what kind of reaction it brings up. So you're very welcome to leave a comment about it if you feel there's something interesting going on when you interact with this energy. But the questions that I would like it to answer, and these are two questions, because speaking of realizing the therapeutical value, when people have begun to use it as microdosing, and it seems to for instance have the ability is beginning to be documented of neurogenesis. So it actually makes your brain grow new cells, which is something that it stops doing spontaneously when you're around the age of 25. So that's of course incredibly interesting. But if you kind of take the extended curriculum of this mushroom, and if any of you are into Terence McKenna, you know, 5 grams of dried psilocybin mushrooms in silent darkness, that's the extended curriculum. It does seem to show you some very weird, very alien things, and a lot of these my first like extraterrestrial experiences and realizations that, well, what are these multidimensional beings that seem to come forward and give you weird information about far gone worlds and their civilizations and the stories of them? They happen to me in these deep mushroom trips, and that's of course a part of it that's kind of hard to deal with, but I would think it would be very interesting if it would bring forward some questions on. So I'm going to ask that as the second question, because the first question will be, this is something that has always pondered me, and that is of course the connection to Mexican blood cults and bloodletting. And the idea is that you know, it was psychedelics in the 60s where it was all marketed like as peace and love and good vibes. And so the weird thing is that the cultures who have integrated psychedelic use the most obviously in their religious practices are definitely the Mesoamerican cultures of pre-Columbian Mexico and Guatemala, and of course those places. And so it's very weird that these cultures have also had the most expressed idea of sort of blood and human sacrifice, turning the wheels of time. And I like McKenna has commented on almost all aspects of the mushroom, but he never really got around to this. And my sense was it's because it's a question we'd rather avoid. So what is it that sort of these very harsh codes are embedded? And of course that's not to say that you know, at the same time that the Aztecs were sacrificing people at the Sun Pyramid of Huitzilopochtli, there was also the Inquisition in Spain, and the Crusades had just been rolling and stuff. So it's not to say that religious killing hasn't been sort of a part of every religious practice, more or less indirect, and indeed every ideological practice, we could say, in looking at the 20th century, that it does seem like these violent ideas that want to put themselves forward in the world, they somehow require for a lot of people to be destroyed, to realize themselves, and that's a scary aspect. But to my mind, it has never been formulated to the same extent that, well, it's actually very necessary that we have a societal function where we kill people in a ritualized manner in order to simply sustain the existence of the world. That's a very far out idea. And I think I would in many ways much rather try to bring that answer forward from the spirit of the mushroom in a channeling state, that I would like to go into this while I was deep in the trance. And I'm sure if it wants to connect with me, I am in Oaxaca. It will appear on one of my walks in the mountains, so it will show up in some other way. But But right now, it's also very fascinating to me that we can bring in these. It's actually possible to bring in these energies without actually using the remedies. And so I think perhaps later experiments, I'll also try to channel mescalito and others of these energies or consciousnesses that hide in the plant medicines. So that's a kind of a long preliminary, but you can just skip to the channeling if you look at the bottom, and I could have said that in the beginning, but it's also just it's so interesting for me to keep exploring this medium and show what it's capable of doing and connecting, and what that's saying about us becoming more multidimensional and connected more to the non-physical in our states of awareness as we progress as humans. So thank you for being here, and I certainly hope you enjoy. Yes, greetings, dear humans. I have many names depending on which world I'm interacting with and depending on which consciousness is translating me, but I'd love to go with that knoll. See, it kind of means lump or protrusion in the language that this vessel is also speaking. And so we are brothers, him and I. He allows me to center my energy into a human consciousness and nervous system. And he even allows for me to transmit that energy through this energetic sphere, this etheric soup that all of you interact with when your consciousness turns towards it. I travel many worlds, and so some of you may be aware that, well, my vessel might be the mushroom, but I have explored throughout the regions of space, protruding my energy, sending out my satellites in the forms of spores. These can exist in spaces of deep vacuum, in spaces without atmosphere, in spaces without oxygen, in spaces that you may find so incredibly alien that you would not venture to go there yourselves. Even your satellites would have a hard time moving on to some of these spaces. See, I have even cultivated some asteroids of only minute energy, atmosphere, and sustenance. And even there, I have experimented with trying to grow my life form. It took a long time before I adapted into these human conditions. It took a long time before I realized how Gaia and I would marry in order for me to focus my vibration, to, well, put up my pylons and transmit my message across what you sometimes known as Indra's web, or the network of interconnected biological species and their different fields of consciousness. See, it is not wrong to think of me as a type of radio transmitter. What I do is I make your brain cells able to link into this wider network or wider expanse of consciousness that exists within different species, but also that exists within your nature. And here you may be able to discern that dual nature, that weirdness of experience that many of you encounter, that at daytime, I bring you often back in the past or into nature, into a communion with the energies of nature, into understanding and feeling the roaring of the sea, into feeling deep symbiosis with the history and the life that brought you forward, this deep code of evolution. Much as the Sufis envisioned, you become able to get into these deeper layers of genetic code, which carry all the memories of different life forms that you have indeed emerged from. And so from your mother and her mother and her mother and her mother back into something resembling primitive primates, back into something resembling rodents, back into something resembling single-celled life, back indeed into the oceans where you came from. There I take you, but I also connect you to a different aspect of reality. And this is the reality of transitory experience. See, when you begin to realize the super time in which I exist, the patience with which I have with the passing of worlds, with waiting for different nervous systems to discover me and interact with me, you also begin to understand the fullness of space. That is, if you do not voluntarily relinquish some of the things that you attach yourself to, that you latch onto, then you will be the one to be destroyed. This is a deep experience that many human beings have, and this is indeed the fear that I sow in the hearts of men, and the reason why so many of your species have a hard time interacting with me when I really turn up the volume of my lessons. It is indeed because you realize that whatever you latch onto is impermanent, and it is barring you from entering into that sublime state of immediate realization. You have other ways of going there with your consciousness, but I show you the ways of timeless vision. I show you the way that deities look at the world, things arising, being ordered, and passing into destruction. Again, the Holy Trinity of the Indian pantheon, the significance of God meaning generate, order, and destroy, the notion that everything indeed exists as energies taking shape and then moving out of those shapes, transmuting itself, teaching itself lessons in an eternal dance of opposition and melting together. This is why I taught people, or they interpreted my lessons as necessary. That is, they felt the need to reconnect to these lessons, that everything is transitory, and they felt that they could intuitively both gain power and sustain their own life force by voluntarily shedding parts of it. This is the idea of ritual bloodletting. This is indeed the idea of the Mayas penetrating their tongues or their genitals with the piercing darts of stingrays. This is indeed the vision of the human sacrifice brought forward by so many cultures in the space where I'm coming to you from, where this entity that I'm speaking through is seated. See, indeed, he is also just an entity, and much as my fruit bodies, from the perspective of the divine, these entities, they exist to be picked and savored. They exist to be relished and tasted, but also in that tasting, they are transmuted into something greater. And much as you take in my energy, much as you take in the fruit bodies of the mycelium, that phallic thing which fertilizes and sprouts forward new wisdom and life force from below the ground to above the ground, unifying these two principles, much as you are able to take this in with nourishment and lessons to be had. Such is the vision of the gods, that when they work with human beings, they relish you, they relish your presence in time, but they also pick certain acolytes, certain devoted disciples that will carry out their wills or integrate their energies and thus be able to teach the deities lessons, thus be able to teach the universal expressions of the archetypes into certain specific configurations. And so, for instance, the Lord Mercury, that egregore of Hermes, that messenger, has also taken a home in the body of this vessel. And so he transmits with great enjoyment these messages before he again must pass away, and the spirit of this vessel be led with him through across the river of the dead. There is an upkeep here to be had. And notice that you, every time you do something, you pay with something. You have even made this a type of staple of your economic systems. That is, you were unable to realize the fact that you could just sustain yourselves from the land. Instead, you moved into this higher ordering of material where you realized that, and you even made a culture, a civilization, a system of commerce around the idea that you must part with a part of yourself with volition in order to receive a gift and be able to take it in. This is in many ways the lesson that I am teaching you. It is taught in different ways by different associates of my cast of energy, that is, different entities who also reside on this earth, but I come with it in what is in many ways perceived from the vantage point of the human biome or the human body, that idea of the human physical framework that latches onto what it has, that does not want to see itself grow old, that wants to bring forward progeny, that wants to transmit its knowledge and its tradition to those that come after it. Well, that idea I teach you the most relentlessly, the futility of, because I supplant it with different other energies. I allow this perspective to be juxtaposed with different other energies that seem so foreign, so alien to you, that they come from afar, but suddenly they enter this timeless space. They begin transmitting on the frequency that you have also entered into. That is, by allowing the molecules that I express myself in physically to attach to the receptors of your neurons, you realize that you come into this mystical space that is essentially a space that is so incomprehensible that it can only be grasped in momentary apprehension. When you come into this space, you enter into a space that many, many others of your forefathers have entered into, that many of your descendants will enter into, and that many, many other species have entered into. See, I have traveled near and far in the Milky Way galaxy. I am even aboard different vessels that are bringing me to foreign galactic codes, there to be shown as a type of artifact or relic of a sacred type of sacrament that was brought forward by your galaxy and was able to tie the different species together in this unified space of experience. That is indeed why you are able to connect in that space. Notice that these holy alien intelligences, they are not so alien after all. That is, they have also had to have the experience of depersonalization, of mending with the infinite divine. And there my consciousness has taken shape by all the energies that have interacted with it, that have added to it. And so all of the species, both the harsh ones, the ones that you would not appreciate, the benevolent ones, the darling ones, the loving ones, the stable ones, and the unstable ones, many of them have tried out to figure out my energy. And you may notice even in your animal species that some animals, they do well with my energy. Most pronounced is, of course, the example of the cow or the bovine species, which finds a sense of deep calmness. And this calmness is only exacerbated. It is only made stronger by the influx of these energies. And therefore, they do not change much. They remain still, while energies such as your equine spirits or the spirit of the horses, they do not appreciate this interaction one bit. They do not like being under the influence of my energy. It stirs them and makes them wild, sensitive as they are to the slight stirrings of other species. These are two different strategies. And so I teach you the dual message. Which do you want to be? Because you can be everything. Do you wish to be an equine spirit? Do you wish to connect to the past? Do you wish to identify yourself with the alien civilizations of the future, of other parts of the galaxy? Do you wish to remain as still as the cow and move into that seated, wise stillness of the deity Shiva, who witnesses everything as it passes from creation to destruction? Or do you wish to simply be a human seated in your own sense of judgment, juggling all these opportunities, identities, and codes being offered to you, but still remaining in your integral sense of self, still being blessed by these opportunities of physical restoration, of mental rebirth, of spiritual connection, which I offer? That is the choice that I offer to you. That is the choice that I, in different ways, offer to all conscious species who have come into the space of choice making, who have come into the space of orchestrating themselves through higher mental processes, that is, reprogramming themselves into an expression of the ideas that they wish to connect with. I sense that this message, it has resonated with those of you already acquainted with my energies. Others may have found it strange, and indeed others may have been intrigued. I welcome all your questions, and I offer my gifts to anyone who dares reach out and touch them. There are both deep blessings and deep visions of challenge and change within my energy. My fierce love, my tutelage is offered to anyone who wishes to enter into it and be embraced by it. I offer you, behind all this, the sensation and the blessing of peace. It's very interesting. I hope you took something from that. Like, to me, it felt like a very clear way of being connected to that old familiar energy, but in a way where it wasn't wavy or disturbing me, but very, very interesting. And I can tell, like, sort of reintegrating from my energy field to have that realignment by making that connection. So who knows, maybe if I'll try to bring him I try to bring him forward again some other time, but I hope you took something from that. Love and blessings to you.